Hello and good evening. Welcome to your second Apostate Alex stream today. Welcome back for those of you who joined me earlier. This is a little bit of a more serious topic. Today is Anti-Slavery Day, and I thought it would be useful to talk about Scientology in the context of how it treats its staff members and how what it's like being working for the Church of Scientology around the world. So let's start with a quick definition on the Anti-Slavery International website, which defines modern slavery as when an individual is exploited by others for personal or commercial gain. Whether tricked, coerced, or forced, they lose their freedom. This includes, but is not limited to, human trafficking, forced labor, and debt bondage. Now, I read this and I thought this is so integral to the way Scientology works. I thought I'd invite some special guests along with me to talk about this. So please welcome Jeff, PTS for Life, Katherine Olson, and our favorite law enforcement officer, Poe on the Go. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Howdy.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you very much.
Wonderful.
I think it's such a good little crew to have to talk about this, because we've got Jeff and I talking from the Class 5 staff member perspective, Katherine from the SEAL perspective, and also having worked in a Class 5 org, and then obviously Poe, you've got your law enforcement background. So I thought it'd be interesting to just open up
a Class 5 org.
Sorry, say again. Sorry.
I did visit a Class 5 org.
You did. That is true. You didn't work.
Oh, I haven't heard.
How did that go?
For official reasons?
Yeah.
I was on my way back from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I'd been in Malaysia. I think I was there almost 3 months, and I had made an announcement I was going to be doing a special live stream from a surprise location. Flew into Tokyo, had about a 30-hour layover, and I said, you know what? It'd be great if I could try to do my live from the Tokyo org. I showed up. I'm wearing my mask. Very nice, wonderful people. The lady behind the counter says to me, you can't wear the cloth mask. You have to wear an N95. And she pointed over to a counter that had them. You had to do the whole sanitization and everything. Take my mask off. She sees me and she's like, she turns to the guy on her right and says something to him in Japanese. And he looks up and his eyes get big and he does this. And she looks behind her. There's a guy on a computer. He looks up, he looks at me, and he goes,
"Oh no, it's Poe."
That means no entry, or it's closed.
That means big bad SP alert.
Yeah. So basically, she told me then that I hadn't been in Japan long enough to meet the qualifications to be in their org. And I'm like, how do you know how long I've been in Japan? You don't know. I just walked in here. And she just basically said, no, you can't come in. You can't come in. You have to leave.
You must be in OSA's Rogues Gallery.
Well, I talked to Aaron Smith-Levin immediately after that. And he said, oh, then they've already emailed to that org and let them know, because there's only 2 orgs I could have gone to. There was either the Tokyo org or the Bangkok org. And everybody knew that I was going to be leaving Bangkok. So that was probably the best location for it, was the Tokyo org.
Wow.
They knew you were coming. Yeah. Wow.
I still wanted to do my live from their little cafe there. They had free Wi-Fi and everything. I thought it looked awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I think this is an interesting one, because there are an estimated 50 million people worldwide who are currently living in what is considered modern day slavery environments. And I think this is something a lot of people don't realize is still going on. David Miscavige is currently a named defendant. He's evading process servers in the lawsuit that's alleging human trafficking. And trafficking is definitely something that goes on in Scientology. Katherine, you were saying earlier you were trafficked to another org to work. Jeff, you were moved as a child from Vancouver to go work for Scientology in LA. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about your experiences being moved around in Scientology to work for the church?
Sure. You want me to go first?
Go for it. Go on,
Jeff. So when I was 14, I was convinced to join the Sea Org down in Los Angeles. I was in Canada. Despite some people's opinion, they are different countries. And the international trafficking laws do apply. The interesting thing about my case other than being 14 years old, was that the individual who gave permission, which was my father, to go down there, was not my legal guardian. And so my mom, when she found out, was rightly so livid, and she actually made me come. They sent me back up to Canada to convince her to allow me to remain in the Sea Org. And I was forced as a 14-year-old to go down to Los Angeles, and I actually went to Gold Base on one day, and I worked in 110-degree heat with nothing but a little bit of water and some electrolytes and an occasional meal for over 12 hours. And so obviously I would consider that modern slavery for sure, especially considering I was a child and had no idea what was going on.
Yeah. So I worked in LA in middle management from 1994 to 2019. And in 2019, there was a big problem because they had several ideal organizations ready to open and hardly any staff for them, almost no staff for these orgs. And one of them was Columbus. And so they were rounding up people from all over the place, people from Clearwater, people from the various bases in LA, just from all over. And so I was not expecting to go at all. Like some people were like, oh yeah, I'm probably going to get sent. I was like, I'd been on the same post for 12 years. So I was like, you're not going to send me. I'm like, no, I've been doing this for 12 years. It's like, you don't take somebody who's been doing a job for 12 years and say, you're going somewhere else tomorrow. That's really stupid. But they did. And I wasn't really given a choice. I sort of was, where it was like, they were a little bit worried that my mom might show up because I was disconnected from my mom at that point and she was declared. And they thought maybe she'll try to show up and talk to me. But then OSA decided it was okay. And I thought I was being a good Sea Org member by agreeing to go. And plus, I actually really wanted to get out of LA anyway. But it was presented in such a way where it was like, if you don't go, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble if you don't go. And you're probably going to be put on, ethics and all this zoo, right? So I had an hour to turn over my post that I've been doing for 12 years. And yeah. And then I left like 3 days later, and it was so bad the way they sent us, because in order to save money, they sent us on a flight from LA to I think we had a layover. We had a layover in Dallas. And then they sent us to Pittsburgh. And then somebody had to pick us up from Columbus and drive us back. Pick us up from Pittsburgh and drive us back. And we were like traveling for like 24 hours. It was like,
even I know that's a pretty long drive.
Isn't that insane? There's an airport in Columbus.
Oh, okay. I have one thing to say about that. They will do anything they can to save some money.
To save a buck, yeah.
If it's spending money on their staff members. And I know this because I went down to Los Angeles as a bookstore officer. They flew me down because it was pretty cheap to go down. But coming back, there was no cheap flights. So I had a 40-hour bus ride back up to Canada because it was a bit cheaper. Because they couldn't find the money for me.
So it was cheaper to send us to Pittsburgh. Plus, they were trying to send a whole bunch of people, and they couldn't find enough flights and all this, like, just total BS.
I think Scientology they don't even think about, like, they don't have any regard for your personal well-being about what you want to do and what's right for you. You know, when I signed my SEAL contract, luckily I didn't arrive in the SEAL organization, but I signed my contract and I was on a Project Prepare, which for those of you watching is basically like a, an action plan, a step-by-step to-do list before you can, get something done. And if I'd have arrived in the SEAL org as I was meant to, I would have landed in Clearwater, Florida, and joined the Sea Org at Flag as a minor under the age of 18. And I was fully willing to go. And I was like, yeah, this is great. Sign my Sea Org contract. I want to go. Fantastic. This is fantastic. But if I had actually done it and I had arrived, I would have been trafficked as a child. It's
I also joined as a minor. I joined when I was 17.
Poe, what's your experience as a law enforcement officer? You know, there are certain criteria and things that you have to look out for and watch for. Having heard some of these stories and other stories from Scientology, like, what's your reaction as someone who is well acquainted with modern slavery and trafficking and this sort of thing?
Well, I think number one, it falls under the definition of either indentured servitude or modern day slavery. I worked human trafficking for almost 15 years as a detective, and then following in my further positions as a deputy chief commander and then a chief of police. And so that was one of the things that we really look out for. And I've talked about it on my channel, how going to Detroit, all these major highways that go into Detroit are literally pipelines either to Chicago or into Canada. So we're constantly looking out for things. You see a van that you pull over. You have someone say, looks like me, but everybody else in the van is all Hispanic, or they're from a Muslim nation, something like that, something that's clearly not looking right to begin with. Then first thing you're going to do is you're going to pull them out. You're going to get them away from everybody else in that vehicle, and then start talking to the people inside. And I found several times when I would do this, the people that are inside, they couldn't speak English, and the driver who was ferreting them around, he couldn't speak their language. So those are all very clear signs of what's going on. And you see a lot of that with what's going on with Scientology, bringing people out of South America into the orgs here in the United States. The stories of holding their passports so that they can't get away. They're basically stuck here. And a lot of them can't even speak any English at all. So it clearly falls under what that definition would be. They're not getting paid what would be considered a reasonable salary for what they're doing, being forced to work hard, long hours. And it's all for the growth or the financial growth or some kind of growth by the person who is actually holding them in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to bring up, this is I'm going to share my screen a second here. This is from antislavery.org. It's Spot the Signs of Slavery. And I thought it'd be interesting to go through this with in context, you know, with relation to Scientology. Here are a few signs to look out for. Someone in modern day slavery might appear to be under the control of someone else and reluctant to interact with others.
And that's
what are your guys' thoughts on that in relation to Scientology?
Oh, well, it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I can't speak on the terms of Scientology for it and how that they're acting. I haven't run into anyone into that situation, but that's a very common thing you see with people who are being trafficked. They're afraid to talk to anyone who's in authority. They are always looking out to the person that if they're going to say something, they look over to the person that's holding them, and they want to look for any kind of recognition from them. Yes, no, things like that before they even try to speak. So that's one of the big reasons why we try to separate them immediately.
And sort of looping back to what Catherine was talking about with her being sent to a different org, even though she, you know, was basically a master of her post and didn't want to go. The thing in Scientology is there's such thing called command intention.
That's right.
And that's what Captain Davy wants, what the overall plan is, and anything that goes against that, you get in major trouble for. So in this case, with that point being something you're under the control of another person, and you're reluctant to talk to anybody, that's because that's been what's been filtered down from the top as how you're supposed to act in Scientology specifically, and in particular, talking with people like us, or even reaching out in a way of like looking at YouTube videos or other kind of content that might counteract what command intention says. So very, very relevant to Scientology.
And also the idea of a sure story, right? Like in Scientology, you're told if you get stopped or pulled over or whatever, this is what you have to say so that they don't flag up, right? Sorry, Go. What were you going to say?
If you look back through history, that is also a very common tactic by suppressors over their, like, say if they someone took over a country, they want to separate the children from their families, get them into a different foreign area from what they're used to. That way they can highly influence how the children think, how they act, and what they do. And it's a very common tactic that is used to break them from that bond of family.
Right.
Yeah. Jeff,
I
what was your shore story when you were being moved from Vancouver to LA? Sorry, Catherine.
It's okay.
Catherine,
It's
who?
always that you're just a religious worker, and you just
Yeah.
keep saying that. I don't remember specifically what I said to the customs, but also keep in mind that this was 96, and so it wasn't exactly the way it is now, where you get grilled as intently as you do at different checkpoints. But anytime I would be sent down to Los Angeles for working reasons, you can never say you're working. You always have to say you're volunteering your time to this organization, because it would be illegal to send us down to work. And so you get drilled by usually the DSA or DSA department on this, how you're supposed to talk to customs and so forth. Every single person who crosses international lines gets coached on what to say. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things we also have to remember is that the statistics that we have for people who are actually victims of modern day slavery, we have no idea, because there are thousands upon thousands, maybe even millions every year that are taken into modern day slavery that you never hear about. There are children who come across in South America that the cartels are using, and they're pipelined straight into the United States into multiple different kinds of situations. So it's very hard to tell how big the figures actually are. And then you add into it an organization like Scientology, and the fact that they're doing all this on the down low, and no one knows what the actual statistics are.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Someone put in the chat a second ago, 13,000 people in the UK are believed to be living under modern slavery terms. But I think that it's probably much higher than that. Scientology boasts they have 700 volunteers that work for them in the United Kingdom. I think that's massively inflated. But even if we take their word for it, and it's 700, well, that's already inflated the modern day slavery number by a lot more. So there is a lot of stuff that goes under the radar that people don't even realize. Catherine, I feel like I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry, go on. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that in the Sea Org and in middle management and in the continental management, anytime there's like a big like a new project is started, or a new like unit of the organization is started, where it's like, this is really important, we need to man this up, we need people for this, we need this area to have staff. So, and it's the responsibility of the continental organizations all over the world. There's one in Africa, Australia, Canada, Denmark, UK, of course, and Mexico. There's one in Russia. There's one in OTL Taiwan. So it's the responsibility of all those continental areas to send people. It's like part of their job. They're supposed to send staff to LA, to Clearwater, to man up flag, to man up the different organizations on the Pacific Bridge, and to man up the international organizations. When I was there, there were several units over the years that were created. There was a new, like, it was called compilations unit, and there were like over 100 people that just started showing up, and they were from all over the world. They would just get sent. And then if they were found to not be qualified for whatever job they were assigned to, then they would be used in some other way to get some other person into that unit, and they become, a dishwasher or a grounds person, or they get sent to some other organization. And it's just like, they move people around like that all the time. And that's happening all the time. They're trying to man up these like international units to do whatever they're going to do. I mean, I can go into that separately because it's quite a bit of information, but there's people coming all the time from these.
Yeah, and they try and get away with as much as they can under the radar, because, for example, when the Golden Age Tech 2 evolution was happening. They were sending people while I was on staff from London, from all the other orgs, over to Flag and Clearwaters to train on how to deliver these new services. And it was one of those, you can travel between the UK and US for 3 months without a visa. There's a visa waiver program, and basically you're allowed to come and go as much as you like. You can stay for as long as 3 months without having to apply for a visa. You're just not allowed to work. But no one really checks. You just show up at the airport and they go, hey, oh, you're from the UK. Yeah, no problem. What are you here for? Tourism. Okay, great. Welcome. Have a great stay. But there's not really a follow-up on, making sure you're actually not working. So these people from the UK specifically, and I can attest to this because I was there and remember it happening, people would be moved from London to go on the 3-month visa waiver to go and train at Flag. And then they would come back at the end of the 3 months and then get an R1 visa to then go back to Flag and continue their training as a religious worker or a religious minister. And they try and do that as much as possible. Around the world to move people on tourist visas, even though they're actually working.
Yeah. And then there's a thing too, where they have in Denmark. So the continental office in Russia used to be under Denmark. I think it's its own thing now. It's gone back and forth, but for a long time it was under Denmark. So then the office in Denmark would be like, we need staff, you need to send us people. And they would try to send them from Russia. And somehow the visas between Denmark and Russia, or relations or whatever it is, doesn't work very well. It's really hard to get a visa between those two areas. So then instead, they would send them to Clearwater because it was really easy for a Russian person to get a visa for the US for some reason. So I don't know if that changed over the years, but I know that was the case at some point because there was a ton of Russians that ended up staffing Clearwater.
Yeah.
What
It'd
did
be
you
interesting
do with the staffers that were coming in that couldn't speak English or couldn't speak the language where you were at?
I only personally witnessed a few cases of those, and specifically I'm thinking of, there was a Taiwanese guy that got sent to be Scientology Media Productions because he was actually a professional violin player, but he hardly spoke any English. And so they're like, oh, we don't know what to do with you. And they like put him as a dishwasher. And he's like, the fuck? Like, what am I doing here? And he was upset like all the time. Like, what am I doing here? Like, I want to go back to Taiwan. No, sorry, you can't go back to Taiwan.
Concert violinist to dishwasher. What an amazing advancement in your life.
Yeah. And because he was told, and he told his family, I'm going to the United States to be a professional musician and blah, blah, blah. And now he's a dishwasher. And he can't leave. They won't let him leave.
And that clearly falls into the definition of, modern day slavery, because it's for the, personal or commercial gain, right? You have someone here with this amazing skill, this talented musician, artist, like artistic person, creative, who's then washing dishes because that's what the organization needs, more than this person's abilities and skills being put to use.
And that especially happened when they were trying to man up as Scientology Media Productions. It happened with a guy from Zimbabwe too, and he was like a pro musician, and he got sent to be part of Scientology Media Productions, and he didn't make it. I don't know, for whatever reason he couldn't be there, and so he wasn't qualified. So it's like, okay, go work in the kitchen, and he's like, what am I supposed to tell my family why I'm still in the US and I'm like hauling garbage and working in the kitchen? Like, why am I here?
He's saving the planet. What else does he need to know?
He since left and went back to Zimbabwe, by the way. So
good. Well, I thought what we could do is move through this list of kind of signs of modern day slavery. We talked about appearing to be under the control of someone else, reluctant to interact with others, that we talked about that having a short story and so on. And this second point, having few personal belongings, wearing the same clothes every day or wearing unsuitable clothes for work. That's, I think, Scientology 101, right? Go on, Catherine. Tell us about how many personal belongings
when I came from LA to Columbus, I had like an hour to pack my stuff, and where I'd been living for like 25 years. And so I just went through and like threw things away and just packed things that I really wanted. And then I was told you're only allowed to take 2 suitcases and the rest of your stuff will be sent to you. So whatever you can fit into 2 suitcases, that'll last you a few weeks. We're going to ship the rest of your stuff. And of course it was like 2 months later or something, or a month later when they finally sent our stuff.
Mm.
But it was so like, nobody cares about you. Nobody cares that you have, 25 years of possessions in your room and you want to like pack your things, and nobody cares. It's like, you're leaving tonight. I was told at, I think, 6 p.m. Yeah, I was told at 6 p.m. that I had a 9 o'clock. I think it was a 9 o'clock flight. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. So then I missed that one. I got on like the 12 o'clock flight or something. But it was like, oh, you have a 6 o'clock. You better go pack. You have a 9 p.m. flight.
Was it the same for you, Jeff?
Well, yeah. So when I was originally recruited for the Sea Org, definitely it was fast. As soon as I signed that contract,
Oh yeah.
it was like, okay, let's get you going. But as an adult, when I joined, I had a project prepare, which basically resulted in I had to pay some debt off and sell all my stuff because I had a bunch of stuff because I was an adult. And so that was kind of that lead up to that. But as far as like wearing the same clothes and all minimal possessions and so forth, the uniforms on the EPF or the boot camp for Scientology, Sea Org,
Yeah.
and the RPF, which is even worse and more degrading because it's all black, and it really makes you stand out like a sore thumb that you're wearing all black. And then of course, if you're on staff in a Sea Org or an ideal org, they all have uniforms, so you all just kind of look the same, and it takes away individuality, which is, I think, a very important part of cult control and coercive control and so forth.
You notice
I
how
think protective
militaristic
gear
it
as
is?
well.
Oh
Sorry,
yeah.
go on.
Well, they modeled themselves after military, and I think that's just because LRH was such a failure in his military career,
Yeah.
that he was trying to somehow be better or stick it to the man kind of thing. But yeah.
Well, I remember when I was in the Army, we always had to have what was called a jump bag. We had to have a bag that was packed at all times, and it had to have what we needed to go out for an extended stay anywhere in the world. And we had to have that ready. And if we got notified, we had to be ready to jump within moments' notice and head straight on over to the airfield and get ready to go wherever we're going. So it's very reminiscent to me, because you would find out, you'd get the call and you'd be told wheels up in however many, in an hour, 2 hours, whatever. But you literally, from wherever you were at on base, you had to make it back to your barracks, grab your jump bag, and then make your way to the tarmac so you could board the plane and get ready to ship out. So
I think the
same-
difference
Yeah,
is though that
if
you're
you signed
you're
up for
working.
that, if that's what you signed up for and you're ready for that,
Right.
okay, fine. But if you're told something totally different, you're going to go and like these guys were told, you're going to go work as a professional musician in LA. You're not told,
Right.
oh, you'd have to just go anywhere at any time. And
it was
And
also
also, you're working in defense, like actually looking after people, and you're protecting the
Right.
country. You're doing something admirable, right? Being in the
Right.
army, being in the military is an admirable thing. Whereas in the Sea Org, they feel like they're protecting the planet, but in actual fact, they're just being abused.
right.
Is the
Well,
matter
it
of
was
fact.
it was a common tactic to give us what were called false drills. And that was to basically shake us up so that no matter what happened, we were always prepared to make that run and jump on that aircraft and get out of there as quickly as possible. So I recognize some of these things that they do, like with the giving you an hour's notice that you have to be packed and on your way. That's not uncommon at all. Those are the kinds of things that we did, and they would oftentimes do the drills on us just to keep us on edge, so that we were always prepared for it.
yeah.
But you were provided the necessities to do your job, right? So, for example, your uniform, you had enough clothes to wear clean uniform all the time. Whereas in the Sea Org and on staff, you're provided like the bare minimum. What was it, Catherine? You get like one pair of trousers and one shirt or something.
It was they actually improved on that when I went to Columbus, but definitely when I was on a Sea Org base in LA, it was horrible. You'd get like the bare minimum, or you just end up buying your own clothes, your own uniform parts. I did that all the time. I was like, I just don't want to. I don't want to have these degraded clothes.
Yeah, Jeff, when they get made, you had to sell off all your stuff. Did you have to give the money to Scientology, or what did you do with it?
Well, the money was to pay off debt. Yeah, I mean, it was such a shtick that of in this situation where they would make these deals and packages of things I had, like DVDs and, various other items. And they would call Scientologists and say, "Hey, we're trying to get Jeff arrived at the Sea Org. Here's 10 DVDs or whatever. How much will you give for this?" And they'll it's maybe worth $10, $2 each or something, for whatever package. But they'll say, "Hey, give us $100 or $200 because it's a donation towards a greater purpose." And that's how they would make more money off the stuff. Because I've never had a lot of stuff. It was always just like very basic things, right? So yeah, it's so weird, but people fell for it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you thought you're gonna go and help save the planet, right?
It's the biggest purpose in the universe.
Right.
Yeah.
And Catherine, you were talking about having to buy your own uniforms. Where did you get the money for that if you got paid at all most of the time?
Well, I got like a whole $46.18 per week. I mean, that goes a long way,
Right. Yeah, I saw Nerman had said something about getting more than $50 a week when I was in the military, but there were times when, we were locked down. We could not leave base for anything. So you could have all the money in the world, but it didn't do you any good.
Yeah.
I'm very used to that kind of control, and we call it discipline in the military, but it's literally a form of control that they're using. So,
but you didn't sign a billion-year contract.
Yeah. I think that's the key difference is, the discipline that the military needs to do what it does is kind of justified, and you can see how it serves a greater purpose. Whereas in Scientology, that discipline is used to control people, which is a negative thing, right? And I think that's the key difference here between modern day slavery and between people who have, signed up to do a good cause work in the military. Another one on this list, if we look at the next one, is not being able to move around freely, and they may not have access to personal identification. It's a very well-known story that Scientology take your passport from you when you join the Sea organization or get moved abroad. I have heard that they've stopped doing that. When I was in Scientology, they said they don't
stopped doing that, at least in LA at the HGB, and I know that for a fact. But I don't know about any other base. I don't know about any other area if they're still trying to do that or not.
Yeah, I know that when I was on staff at London and the Golden Age Tattoo thing was happening, people going to flag, they said that they don't take the passport any longer because I think it was just a bit too hot. However, that doesn't mean they're not limiting your freedom and ability to move around, because yes, you might be able to, go outside of the building and walk to the other building, but you're going to be watched the whole time. It's not like you can just pack up and go, right? Jeff, what was your experience?
Going to know where you are the whole time, and you have to report in, and you have to go to a muster 3 times a day, and if you don't show up, you're in trouble. And it's just there's just so many control points that it's just ridiculous.
Jeff, what was your experience like working in LA when you arrived in the Sea Org, and the movement, the freedom of movement, and how closely they kept an eye on you when you were there?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was younger, I do recall they took my passport away, and I didn't understand that at the time. And I think it was the security chief. If anyone's familiar with the building, I remember they brought me right to what's called the Horseshoe area, and that's where the security was in the door there. And they just said, "Give us your passport," and I was like, "Okay." Never saw it again until I had to come back to Canada.
Wow.
And then because I had been sent back to Canada, they gave it to me for flying. And then when I came back again after convincing my mom, they took it away again.
Well, you guys know what it feels like. You're suddenly thrust out into the civilized world, and you don't have identification. You don't have a means of taking care of yourself. You don't know what's going on. And how many times have we heard this story where if it hadn't been for people like Mike or Mark and Claire or the Aftermath Foundation, most of these folks would, they have no idea what they're going to do, where they're going to go, how they're going to feed themselves. The terror of that alone.
That was one of my first thoughts before I left. I was like, where am I going to go? Because at that point, I wasn't I wasn't reconnected with my mom, and I didn't know what I thought about that yet. And my mom and my sister, I hadn't spoken to my extended family except for my 90-year-old grandmother in like 15 years. So I'm like, I don't know where I'm gonna go. That was like one of my first thoughts.
But let's also remember, we were talking about the comparisons with the military. You guys, at some point truly believed in what you were doing as well, did you not?
Oh yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
a big thing about it is
yeah, that's why you would agree to that. That's why you would agree
Mm.
to like go within an hour's notice. You're like,
Yep.
yes, sir.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I'm
that's
gonna
why
go.
you surrender your passport. You're like,
Mhm.
yeah, you're like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's a small sacrifice I have to pay in order for the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics, right?
I have a story about that. So the way I found out about them not taking the passports anymore is I had a junior, and she went on a leave to Amsterdam, and she came back, and she mentioned to me that the legal officer hadn't given her passport back to her yet. She's like, I don't know why this person still has my passport. And my first thought was, well, we're supposed to turn in our passports. And I thought it was really weird. I thought she was just like off the rails or something. I'm like, she's supposed to turn in her passport. I actually call the legal officer and I'm like, hey, this person is complaining about the fact that she hasn't gotten her passport yet. But I thought that you were supposed to keep all the passports. And she didn't answer me for a second. And then she's like, so we don't keep passports anymore. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, it's actually illegal. We can't do it anymore. I'm like, wow, interesting. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But I thought it was like totally usual to like turn in your passport. I'm like, no, you're supposed to turn in your passport.
But that's very much like with what you see with modern day slaveholders is this is all about isolationism and making the person feel like they are trapped and have no way out. And that's how they're able to work these people. If I don't work and I don't do what they tell me to do, I'm not eating. They're not going to take care of me. They're not going to let me have a plate. They're going to make me sleep on the floor or make me stand up and sleep against the wall. And these are all very common tactics that you see. All they're doing is they're making you instead of what you see with your average modern day slave, where they feel they have no choice out. Scientology is making you believe that you're doing this for a greater purpose and making you actually work harder because you believe that you're doing something that's going to save everyone. So,
right.
But it's still the same flavor, just a different apple. So.
Jeff, what was your thought process when you arrived in LA and you gave up your passport and you thought you're doing a great thing, and then did it ever cross your mind that you wanted to leave? And how did you figure out how to do that? Because if they've got your passport and they want to make you believe like you can't leave, that like what happened in your head when you were like, I need out?
Yeah, I mean, when I was down there, for anyone who's heard my story, I basically got really sick, and I went PTS according to them. And after a bunch of ethics handlings, I started saying I wanted to leave, and I convinced them that if I joined staff at the Class 5 org in Vancouver, I would do that. It was kind of like a negotiation. If you let me leave, I'll go do this and I'll work in this org. And that's the only point where they were actually able to or willing to give me my passport, is once I told them that I was going to do something kind of to make up the damage, or where I was still under control. Yeah. And I don't know if that was necessarily conniving on my part or not, but I remember having the sensation that all I need to do is convince these people to let me leave, because I was homesick. I was actually sick. I think I had close to pneumonia. And all they were doing to handle me was a PTS handling, right? Which is not what I needed. I was in isolation. Like, yeah, wasn't good.
Wow. Oh my God.
And I think also just bear in mind that, the solution was continued work for the organization. Like when you look at the definition of modern slavery in context of, indebted servitude and, working for the organization, that's what your solution was. If you let me leave, I will continue working for you in a different place. And that's what got them to give you that partial freedom, right?
Yeah.
The next one on the list is to be reluctant to talk to strangers or officials, including police officers or health workers. Poe, I don't know if you've ever come across any Scientologists in your time working for the police, but I'm guessing you have come across people who have been in situations like, human trafficking or, slavery and this sort of thing. How would you pick up on someone? What are the warning signs of sort of things they might say to you, for example?
I've literally been there when we've opened the back of a semi-trailer and there were dozens of Hispanic people that were in the back. They were in the most inhumane conditions. They were being made to go to the bathroom in buckets. And the smell, then you have the smell of unclean people, and they're all sitting there on the floor. They've got their knees up to their chest. They're holding on to their knees. You could tell that they're just absolutely terrified. And it didn't matter if you were a police officer, because they were told if the police catch you, they're going to put you in prison. So these folks, it took a lot. We had to actually bring in social workers and people who work in the psychiatric industry to be able to talk to these people, to get them to come out, and that way we could start getting them on the right path to get them taken care of. And then on top of all of it, you're talking, every one of these people had turned over any kind of documentation they had to the coyotes that were the people that were shuffling them around. When we found them in many situations, one situation I was talking about with the van, pull it over, this guy gets out and he looks like your typical hold my beer and watch this kind of redneck you'd see from Florida Man videos. And once we got him out and got him separated from the crowd, the people that were in the van, they refused to look at us. They would just look out the windows, or they would look to each other. Most of them, if they were on the side of the van where he was, would look towards him to try to get any kind of guidance from him. It's amazing how much control these people have over them. If they were able to break the cycle, they literally could have overpowered this guy and taken over the van themselves. But they were terrified of what he was going to do to them.
Yeah.
Just like David Miscavige. He'd be really easy to take down. He's so small.
Yep.
He's smaller than me, and I'm short.
He's like what, 4'13", isn't he?
But you're not going to find anyone near him that's going to do that.
Well, that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
My question is, does David Miscavige have the required work visa for his visit to the UK in 2 weeks, where he will be arriving at St. Hill Manor to work in the form of giving a speech at the congregation of the IAS on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of November?
You should investigate that, Alex.
He does require a work visa for that. And my question is, does he have one? And also, what about all of the other people who are coming here to work for the IES event? I have a list of hundreds of people that are expected to arrive in the next few days that have been handed to the appropriate authorities to say, hey, these guys will be traveling to the UK in the coming week or two to work for Scientology. And, you better keep an eye on them to make sure that they've got the required work visas. Because if they come on the visa waiver and then spend 2 weeks here working for the church, they are breaking immigration rules.
Okay, so I have a story. So when the org opened in Auckland, New Zealand, actually the shoot crew, half the shoot crew team from Scientology Media Productions could not get into the country because whoever was in charge of like making sure they had the right visa and whatever, put them on the wrong visa and put them on a visa that said they were going to work over there. And New Zealand said, nope, you're not coming in. And so David Miscavige had to do the Auckland opening with like some local company instead of Scientology Media Productions, because they couldn't get in the country.
Yeah. So that's what I mean is I think they'll try and get in as many people as they can under the visa waiver program, because it takes a long time to get the required visas. Fluffy Wickets just said here, Alex, he may not. I think he can work for a short period of time without a work visa. If he had a tourist visa, yes, there's a limited amount of work you can do. I think it's like 16 hours or something like this. But on the visa waiver program, you are not allowed to engage in any work whatsoever as a US citizen working in the UK or the UK working in the US,
It's been a while since he and I went out for drinks. What kind of entourage does he keep with him?
He has a large group of people,
Yeah,
right?
he has a lot of people with him. I don't know. People have said that Lou is still his assistant. I've actually never seen her when he's come to the HUB. I've never seen her. I
The
saw
stories
something
I've
else.
heard is it's almost like presidential. It's just a row of black SUVs, blacked
Yeah,
out windows,
yeah,
those kinds
something
of
like
things.
that.
So
Yeah, he has a lot of people with him. So
wow.
And he
Alrighty.
hides very easily in there as well. You
and
can't
he
see him.
hires private
he
security.
can get lost in the crowd.
Yeah.
That was another question I was going to have. He uses a company here in the United States, as far as I know. That's what's been reported to me. He uses a company that uses a lot of former military and
Yeah.
federal agency people as
Yeah.
his security. If they're going over there, how are they getting in without having the problems of they don't have the proper documentation to be there, those kinds of things, plus the fact that they're there working as his personal security. So I'd love to see how they're handling all that.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating.
Oh.
All right, let's crack on with this list. We've got two more. This one is appear frightened or withdrawn or show signs of physical or psychological abuse. Poe, I think you're a good one to answer this. What do they mean by signs of physical or psychological abuse? Like what are you on the lookout for as a police
Well, you're going to find someone that's malnourished. Number one, that's going to be a big thing. They're going to be unclean. And we're not just talking about they didn't take a shower yesterday. We're talking about someone who has gone for days, weeks, even months without ability to get a shower. Your literally skin's going to hang off of them. They're going to look like those commercials you used to see back in the 80s and 90s of children from Ethiopia that were just bone thin. Their clothing is going to be just horrendous. It's going to be torn. It's going to be worn out because here it is again. They've been staying in the same clothing for a long time. So these are all things that you're going to see. You're going to see the fingernails. That's a real big sign. You see someone, their fingernails are long, dirty, but yet they're all chipped up and broken and things like that. They have no access to any way to take care of themselves or even do basic general personal hygiene. And those are very, very good signs of what's going on. Matted hair, even infestation of insects, ticks.
I think that's one that Scientology are really aware of as a clear visual sign of what they're doing. So they have really high up standards of like visual standards, right? There are strict policies on, beards and haircuts and, how you look visually and keeping clean. So I think that's one where they know that if someone sees these things, it's really clear. So let's make sure we don't look like we're trafficking these people, even if that is what we're doing.
Right.
Exactly.
And plus, you think about it, Scientology is trying to make itself appear as though, like everyone knows, they want to make everyone think that they are above the general people or wogs or whatever they're calling them. So they want to make sure that their staff are clean and look good and look very presentable. Like I said, when I walked into Tokyo work, they looked very professional, were very nice. They were very accommodating until they realized who I was. So, I mean, it's all a facade just to make everything look better.
Yeah.
Well, and they're always so enthusiastic. Everything's always so great and we're doing so well. And it's always this very unnaturally fake enthusiasm that nobody could possibly have all the time.
Yeah. Be
And that's
uptone.
drilled.
Yeah. Stay uptone, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't be down.
Especially if you're working with public.
Now,
Yeah.
Nerman had the question about Social Security numbers. Of course, in Canada and in the UK, that's going to be something different than we have here in the US. What do they do about that with the staffers and the org members who are working in those other countries as well?
So the question was, questions to panel, when you were in, did you have a social security number for work, right? That was posted by Nerman. Is that correct? Yeah.
I mean, definitely US people in the US have a social security number.
Right.
Like if you're a US citizen.
Yeah, anyone born in the U.S. is generally assigned a Social Security number at birth. So
I don't know how it works if you come from another country on the R, because they were using the R1 religious worker visas for people. I don't know how that works. I guess when you become a citizen, you get a Social Security number. I don't know how that works.
Well, I don't think that you would necessarily become a citizen. And for example, my nephew Huckleberry, he was down in LA for, I want to say at least 15 years. and only recently, like he came back up after he left up to Canada, but he couldn't stay long because he wanted to get his citizenship, so he had to go back and do work and everything. So I don't think that's guaranteed. I think that's just as long as you're working for that organization, that visa applies.
The way it was explained to me when I was on my project prepared to arrive in the Sea Org at Flag, what they said is you go over there. This is the process that they were using. They're probably still using today, although I know that R1 visa is changing. But process is you arrive in the US on your visa waiver 3-month thing, because that gets you in, and then you can start your training tomorrow. Then when that expires after 3 months, you come back to the UK, you get your R1 visa. All you have to do is this fast track course, the religious minister course that Scientology came up with for this specific reason. Then you get a certificate that says you are a Scientology minister, and therefore that entitles you to the R1 visa. You get the visa, and then you're allowed to live and work in America as long as you're doing work for this religious entity. But you have to be working in a religious ministerial role. So training to then go back to your org to deliver services as an auditor doesn't actually qualify you for the R1, but no one's checking because you've presented this document and you've said you're going to work for Scientology. They're not actually showing up to check if you're working or training. But regardless, that gets you the R1 visa. And for those of you, what the plan was for me, because I was going to stay in Clearwater and work at Flag, was once you've had the R1 visa renewed every year, which is really easy to do, once you've been in the US for a certain number of years, you are then eligible for a green card or for citizenship, and then you can stay indefinitely. And it's just an easy way to get someone into the States working for Scientology, and then it's no problem to just continue staying there as long as you want. But that whole system, I think, has changed now.
There's a full-time person posted in OSA International called the immigration officer, who works on visas and green cards and citizenships for Sea Org members and staff. Like that's his job. That's all he does.
Wow.
I wonder how this is going to be affected by the new rules changes that were just announced recently about the religious rights that they have to come in and work. There's been a lot of changes to that, and it looks like they're going to start cracking down on things pretty heavy.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Good.
Yeah.
Alrighty. The last one on our list is be dropped off and collected for work always in the same way, especially at unusual times, very early or late at night. Well, in the Sea Org, they have buses to pick you up from your berthing and dropping you off early in the day and then picking you up late at the night. Am I right in saying that's at every Sea Org base, Catherine?
Yeah, that's pretty much true. And the bigger the base, the more they have like staggered schedules and different pickup times and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. So that's the end of our list here. So here are some things to look out for. Someone in slavery might. I don't think there was a single one really. The physical signs perhaps isn't relevant, but the rest of this list is completely relevant to someone working in Scientology, right? What are your thoughts, guys?
I would say even the physical signs. If you've ever seen that video with Mike Rinder when he was in the hole, there was definitely physical signs that he was, in slavery. And I've seen there was a guy in the Toronto CLO who was most definitely overworked, and he was an older gentleman who looked gaunt. He barely had time to eat, worked to the bone. And he was he was definitely showing physical signs as well as psychological. So
and look at Bob Ferris.
I looked at I saw some pictures of myself when I was still in the Sea Org, like specifically in Columbus. And I look at my eyes and I'm like, I look like my eyes look haunted. Like I look like there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And compared to pictures now, I'm just like, wow, that's fascinating.
Look at the video of Bob Ferris. I mean, he's in his 70s, making him dig ditches. And I've heard from other people that, before they blew, they were working as staffers, and they were working in the lunchroom, and they were literally eating things off the plates that other people weren't eating because that was the only way they were going to eat for the day. Yeah. So I think that the physical part of it also plays into it, because you're going to see signs of malnourishment, those kinds of things that are going on. And So I think everything on that list does apply in one way or another.
Yeah.
So
I think this is the thing people don't realize, and I can't harp on enough about this, is Scientology is doing this stuff right now under everybody's noses, and while it is tax exempt in the United States, if you are a US taxpayer, you are subsidizing this behavior and this activity because they are tax exempt, and until they get their tax exemption revoked, they will continue to do this, and they get away with so much under the guise of religion. It should outrage people, and I don't understand how more hasn't been done to prevent this happening and to protect children, for example, from enduring these horrible working conditions working for the church.
Yeah. And I think that KP says it very well. The scariest boogeyman out there is the one who doesn't look like it. You look like you're this
That's right.
great, strong leader who's out there trying to save the world. We saw what happened with the rise of the Reich. These are exactly what happened. And it's things like that we have to watch out for. A charismatic person who is out there to save everyone, but you have to give up everything and follow only what they have to say.
Right.
Those are the most frightening ones of all, because they'll kill off anybody that they think goes against them or is a danger to their thoughts anyway.
Yeah. All right, shall we get through some of these questions? I've been starring them as we've gone on. Let's start with some of the super chats. World Snacked, thank you for the super chat. Are minors still used as staff in COS? Well, from my personal experience, I can say yes. What about you guys, Jeff and Catherine?
I've seen a lot less of that. Specifically in Columbus, I know that there was one girl that they wanted to recruit, and they're like, oh no, we can't do it until she finishes school. And so I think it's being cracked down on more, like in the Sea Org. I don't know about Class 5, how that goes.
Well, I mean, I know that definitely they will take anybody who will join the Class 5 org in Canada, whether they're a teenager or not. Certainly underage people will work there, but they used to be much more lax about not doing schoolwork. Because when I joined the Sea Org and then came back to Canada, I was intended to do, I think it was 2.5 hours of schoolwork a day to remain on staff, just for legal reasons. But I never did it, and no one ever made me do it. But now I think it's much more strict, because you can get in a lot of trouble for truancy with the child, especially if they're working, right? It's a PR nightmare, I'm sure. And so,
and I don't think they let people drop out as easily as they used to, because I was able to drop out of school when I was a sophomore, like a little ways into my sophomore year. I was able to drop out, and now I don't know if that's as easy to do now.
Well, I think the ease of that comes with the fact that there's so much homeschooling nowadays. It's very easy to say, well, I'm their guardian and I am taking them out of school because I don't trust the schools. I don't think they're going to be safe. So we're going to do homeschooling. And then you just never hear about them again.
Yeah.
In the UK, it's a little bit stricter, because even if you homeschool someone, you still have to, you don't get inspected in the same way as school does, but you do have to show evidence of a curriculum, and you can have a really relaxed policy and stuff, but you do have to show that you are actually teaching them some form of education. When I joined staff the first time, I was still in school. And the idea was, instead of finishing school, I would go and continue on staff. That ended up not happening. And the middle ground that was agreed was, okay, how about I go to Greenfields, which is like Delphi, but the UK version, for the last 2 years. That way it's Scientology, I can finish my school, but actually probably get away with working in the org as well, or instead. And then that didn't end up happening. I ended up going back to school for 2 years. And then as soon as I rejoined, I was back on staff full time. But the process for me was, I was under 18. As long as I had one parent verbally say to me that yes, it's okay, I signed the contract, and the thing was, yes, I confirm that my parent gives me permission to work here as a minor. My mum never signed anything. I signed it, and said, yeah, I've asked my mum. Yeah, she said it's okay, which of course any kid's going to do. And it's not actually a legally enforceable contract. But
And also remember, it's going to vary from state to state here in the United States. Every state's going to have its own separate laws or rules on it. I know places where people, they pull their children out of the system and they homeschool them. And the only reason they have to do state certified testing or anything like that is for the homeschooling to count towards an actual education. Otherwise, you have a lot of groups like the Amish and groups like that that refuse to fall under any kind of state curriculum. So it's a real, basically a turkey shoot here. You don't know what you're getting.
And I think they can get around it a little bit in the Sea Org too if they put them on full-time training.
Yeah.
Like full-time Scientology training, not school. Yeah.
Kay, thank you so much for the super chat. The super chat
you.
sending love and light. We love Kay. Kay's awesome. Jack had a really good question here. Like, WTF, why is COS recruiting senior citizens from Scientology public to work in orgs or NOI members to work in orgs? Well,
because they get whoever they can get. Like, whoever they can get. They don't care how old they are. They don't care about anything. If they don't work in the org, they'll make it happen.
And then they're not afraid of it either. The video that was released recently on Tony Ortega's blog that showed all the London staff members saying, hey, we're going to the IES event. In that video, one of the key people is an NOI member that is on staff at London Org. They are not afraid of that association.
Wow. Well, there are two reasons why someone isn't going to join staff. Because when I would recruit, I would always...
Joey knows
Joey.
It. Joey knows.
You guys notice the Mario cube there? That's new.
I like
love it.
So
what's the significance of that?
Sorry?
What's the significance of that?
It's Mario. That's
just that's
cool. It's cool. That's all.
And she grew up in a cult. She doesn't know about that. Right?
I used to play Super Mario Brothers. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to play that like very long.
And it makes a sound when I turn it on. Anyway, just to make me smile. So reasons why someone won't join staff, one of the biggest things, especially in Vancouver, is cost of living is so high, they can't afford to, right? So if you are going after elderly people or even just people who are just above retirement age, they have that ability to have more time and they need less money in order to be on staff. And so they would target those people. But they're usually people who have been in Scientology in that field for many, many years. And so they already have that drive and purpose and the emotional connection with the group. So it's harder for them to say no.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty common.
I mean, look at museums and different organizations here in the U.S. A lot of them rely on seniors who volunteer their time to help do menial tasks within those places. And it's not uncommon. They, like you said, they have the time to do things. If you have them committed to it, they're going to work harder than you would actually think they could. And they think that they're working towards a better situation for everyone other than themselves. So
that's right.
It's based on passion.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Champagne Hand here has a great one. Great name, by the way. Question. I think I remember a former SEAL member saying that COS held their passport. We were talking about that earlier. Did they hold staff passports as well? For me, no, they didn't hold my passport. They did take a scan of it because I was legally employed by the Church of Scientology. So they did have a copy of it. But that was my passport. They didn't take that away from me. How about you guys from your class 5 time?
No. There'd be no reason to.
I didn't have a passport when I was in Portland and when I was in Columbus. I actually didn't get a passport at all until I left the Sea Org.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot more common in the US though, because the US is so large.
Right.
You can go to so many different types of places. In the UK, everyone has a passport because you only have to drive 4 hours and you hit the sea. So alrighty, there's another one here. Mrs. J, fantastic. Victims of modern slavery and human trafficking are men, women, and children of all ages, ethnicities, and nationalities. I think that's the point I wanted to raise in this particular stream, is that anybody can be a victim. We've been talking here about Scientology because it's an experience we're all familiar with, but Scientology is not the worst or the only example of how slavery
Right.
still exists today in the modern day, under a lot of people's noses. And that's why I wanted to have this video today to talk about, it's anti-slavery days, and it's still happening whether you like it or not.
And if you look back in the history of slavery and just mankind, period, slavery has been prevalent throughout mankind's history. And before we had the ability to go to other continents, go to other places, we didn't have the ability to travel. Slavery was whoever were the weakest of society that could be dominated by the strongest of society. So oftentimes, up until more recent history, slavery was all within the same nationality, creed, race, however you want to say it. And so that's, it's been prevalent. So it's happened on every continent, and it's happened to pretty much every race or nationality of people throughout the world. So yeah, that's a very true statement as to it.
Selena here has a really great point. As someone who runs a charitable organization, it's often a requirement from funders for us to have an anti-modern day slavery statement. I don't know if this is the same in Canada or the US, but if you're in the UK and you go to a big major UK organization's website, they will have at the bottom terms, conditions, privacy policy, copyright, and they should have a anti-modern day slavery statement as well. And it is a requirement for all charities in the UK, as far as I'm aware, to have a statement on their website that is public that says that they are against modern day slavery, and this is what they do to make sure they are not contributing to that problem in any way, shape, or form. Now, Scientology were rejected charity status in 1999, so they don't have to have this statement. But if they apply again, which is possible, and they do get charity status, they will have to have something, a public declaration on their website about what they do to prevent modern day slavery, which will just be fascinating, because I don't think they'll be able to legitimately write such a thing, considering the way they treat their own staff members.
Yeah.
Well, I founded and ran the Southeast Michigan Reptile Rescue for over 15 years. There were no requirements we had to do anything like that. As a matter of fact, if you look in some of these kind of organizations, the ones that aren't, should we say, the most on par, they basically treat their volunteers like slaves, and they make them feel as though they are horrible people if they aren't giving everything they've got to help out this organization. So yeah, I'd love to see that be a law here in the United States.
Yeah.
All right, and last one I've got starred here, Amanda Beaumont. Is this a relative of yours, Jeff?
How can you
I'm
tell?
just Johnny, just got off from work.
That's my sister.
We love Amanda. Amanda's a regular chatter in all of our chats. Hi, Amanda. I hope
There is another Amanda Beaumont, though, who is not my sister.
Oh,
so that's my sister, but there's one, if it's all lowercase letters, that's not my sister.
that's a different Amanda. I see. Okay.
Yeah, pure coincidence.
All right, guys. I think this has been fantastic. Is there anything you wanna bring up or say before we wrap up here?
I just wanted to say one more thing, which is that so Scientology has these things they call PSAs for the human rights PSAs, and they talk about no slavery in there and stuff. They talk about freedom to move and things like that. And there was a point where I saw one of those. I think it was the freedom to move. And I was watching it one time and I'm like, I don't feel like I have that. And I was just like, and it was such I don't know what you call it, cognitive dissonance or whatever. And it's just like, I really don't feel like I have that. And it made me feel really weird. I'm like, wow, we have this video and we're promoting this, some TV stations and whatever. And yet as a Sea Org member, staff member, I don't have that. Like something's wrong here. So if Sea Org members especially can just realize the hypocrisy, that'll go a long ways.
Yeah, that's the thing. Modern day slavery takes many different forms and is, there are multiple signs to look out for to see if that is something that your organization is doing. And what we've done here today is gone through those signs and pretty much pinpointed that all of them are applicable to the Sea Org and to Class 5 staff. And, I think that's all you need to do is just look at that yourself and go, hey, hold on. does this apply to me? And you'll see that maybe this is something you shouldn't be involved in, right?
Yeah, totally.
So, Jeff, how do people go and find your channel? I've put a link in the description, but how do people find you, support you, all of that sort of stuff?
Oh, I just threw a link in there also for mine. So
yeah, and mine is just PTS for life. There's links there. I just released a new piece of merch, a new mug.
Oh, excellent.
And I think it looks pretty good. Support SBTV Canada.
Oh.
Nice.
I'm starting a channel.
Oh yeah, and
how
Katherine is starting a channel.
Yes, excellent.
Finally.
We're gonna get her going, and we'll make sure to get her on lots and get lots of subs.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
You know, every time you come on my channel, Katherine, I'm inundated with emails and comments going, "We love Katherine. When are you coming back? When are you starting your own channel?"
This stuff. I love doing this stuff. I've helped directly help several people doing these videos now. Like, people have contacted me, former Scientologists, former Sea Org members, or people that are like, I help get somebody out of the Sea Org.
That's awesome.
And it's just great. I love doing this.
That's a good feeling.
Anything that we can do to help you get set up on your channel, you know, just let us know. Just drop us a text or an email. We're always here, you know, help you with StreamYard, with buying coffees, all that sort of stuff. Get it set up. We're here to help. The more of us, the better, because people relate to different people's stories. And so the more opinions there are, the better, because then the more people will be like, oh, I resonate with that person, or I remember that person.
Exactly. Especially if you know the person. Especially if you know the person. It makes all the difference.
Super important.
Yeah.
And I think something that a lot of people don't realize is that throughout our lives, especially if you live near major metropolitan areas, you probably come in contact with someone who is being held in slavery and don't even realize it. It could be the nanny who's watching the children. It's so many different things, and we don't even realize it. So an organization like Scientology, having everyone try to look as nice and as clean and as professional, be happy and open to everyone, you're going to walk right by that and never even notice that you've just been by someone who's been trafficked.
Yeah.
So
exactly. So if you do think anybody is in trouble, or you think that there's something like this going on that you're aware of, or you have a friend that's in Scientology, you know, contact the local law enforcement or authorities. You know, if you know someone in Scientology that you want to help get out, contact the Aftermath Foundation. You know, there's a whole support network here to help these people. And, you know, if you know someone being held potentially against their will, that is illegal, and that is something that cannot happen. So get law enforcement involved. But guys, thank you so much for joining me. This is a fantastic stream, and we'll have to have you guys back soon. If you want to support the channel, we've all got coffees apart from Katherine. Katherine will be soon. Buy us coffee with the link down below, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
excellent.
Bye.